Maduro. I'm joined now by Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi of Illinois. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. I know you sit on the House Intelligence Committee. I want to start by having you listen to what your Republican colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene, had to say this morning when asked if this serves President Trump's so-called America First policy. Listen to this.
My pushback here is if this was really about narco-terrorists and about protecting Americans from cartels and drugs being brought into America, the Trump administration would be attacking the Mexican cartels. Now, I am not defending Maduro, and of course I'm happy for the people of Venezuela to be liberated, but Americans celebrated the liberation of the Iraqi people after Saddam Hussein. They celebrated the liberation of the Libyan people after Gaddafi, and this is the same Washington playbook that we are so sick and tired of that doesn't serve the American people.
So what's your reaction to that, Congressman?
I actually agree with a lot of her sentiments. She's correct. This is not about narco-terrorism. If it was, the president would not have pardoned the former president of Honduras, who had been convicted in an American court of trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine into the United States. And my constituents, and for that matter, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, not a single one has said they want to run Venezuela. They want to occupy Venezuela. And so this is something that is completely against the will of the American people, in my opinion.
I know, Congressman, you just left an emergency meeting of congressional Democrats. What can you tell us about those conversations?
Well, I don't want to get into the details, except that I can tell you there were three, large concerns that people are reflecting from their constituents. One is that, again, our constituents don't want us to be occupying Venezuela or to be in the middle of a civil war, or to be in an Iraq or Afghanistan style occupation or endless war. Secondly, I think that people are very concerned that what has happened is emboldening our adversaries, whether they're in Moscow or Beijing or elsewhere, to basically pursue similar actions, whether it's in Taiwan, Ukraine, or other parts of the globe, thus lowering our national security. And then the third and final point is we should not be distracted by trying to occupy another country when we have so many pressing domestic problems right now, and our constituents are losing their health insurance. They can't afford their groceries. The businesses are going bankrupt because of tariffs. And so we are basically in a situation where the president appears to be, in some ways, distracting attention from pressing domestic issues for this foreign adventure in Venezuela.
The Trump administration, as you know, Congressman, carried out this military operation without consulting Congress at all. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said it was the kind of trigger-based mission you can't notify Congress about. They were worried about potential leaks that could undermine the operation and endanger U.S. troops. What do you make of that?
Well, look, we always want to safeguard our troops and make sure that their well-being is always taken care of. However, in this particular situation, clearly we basically had our armed forces engage in hostilities in Venezuela. That is the textbook example of when the War Powers Act is supposed to be invoked, and Congress only has the power to decide when to go to war. And that's why a War Powers Resolution is so appropriate now, because if the Republicans want to come to Congress and convince the American people that we should occupy or run Venezuela in order to access its oil, they can feel free to do so. But they need the will of the American people to take any further actions, certainly military actions, in Venezuela.
Going forward, Congressman, what do you expect from the Trump administration about future military involvement in Venezuela? What do you need to know?
Well, I think right now we need to know exactly, how many troops are going to be deployed in Venezuela. We need to know for what duration. What is the transition? How do we make sure that we work with our friends, partners, and allies to get to a better place now versus where we're at even yesterday? I think that there's so many questions with regard to the use of our military power, and I think that the president must come to Congress at this point to seek authority for any further exercise of those powers.
And if he doesn't, what kind of recourse do you have?
Well, as you know, the War Powers Resolution allows Congress to block or to prevent the president from deploying such troops in harm's way. And so, again, we don't need all Republicans necessarily to join Democrats, although I think Democrats will be unified on this particular issue. But we need some, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or Mr. Massey or others who've expressed severe doubts about what has happened. We need to make sure that, again, this president is held accountable. We don't need another Iraq or Afghanistan-style occupation in Venezuela.
I know you and others, Congressman, have expressed deep concern that this military operation will embolden U.S. adversaries like Russia and China. How do you think it emboldens them?
Well, basically, just think of Vladimir Putin. He could say that Zelensky is a narco-terrorist, and he's going to go after Zelensky in Ukraine. Or think about Xi Jinping and saying that, well, some pretext justifies the invasion of Taiwan for reunifying with China. You can see any number of instances where, again, our adversaries are going to use this as the justification or use this as an example of why we employ a double standard, why they should be able to do as they will in their spheres of influence, ultimately creating disorder in the international system. At the end of the day, I think this really hurts the American people because it lowers our national security. It makes it more likely that somehow our interests will be harmed, and worse, that somehow we may be engaged in some type of armed conflict elsewhere on the planet.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.